So, guys, welcome to another episode of AI for Dummies. I am here, as I was just telling Nathan and Will, in a farm in Ibiza. Nathan's reaction was, I didn't realize there were farms in Ibiza, to which I explained, you got the like touristy going out scene, which, Will, you're going to, and then there's very much like this bohemian, there's this bohemian kind of like yoga meditation kind of scene. So I'm in that.
That was a
So
call out, dude. I'm going to the touristy Ibiza. You're at the non-touristy Ibiza. I get it.
yeah. But anyways, I'll get more into that. So if you hear there are roosters and peacocks and like different farm animals here. So if you hear anything, that it is what it is. That's just it is what it is. We'll spice it up a bit. But really excited to have Nathan Lebanz. Am I pronouncing that
Lebanz
correctly? Nathan?
Excuse me, Lebanz. I say. Yep.
Apologies. Nathan Lebanz, really excited to have you here. The context is Will and I both use Adathena, which is an amazing company, and they provide virtual EAs as well as kind of we use them for customer service ops, all kinds of things, who are phenomenal, mostly in the Philippines. And Nathan just joined as an AI advisor to that company, but he's also involved with a bunch of other projects related to AI. So I'll let him kind of do the quick intro, but he also has a podcast, which I'll let him kind of describe. He's had some amazing guests, Elad Gil, Sarah Guo, Mohammed Felfel, who we just talked about, Play HD, who I believe is a founder. And so I've learned a lot just recently listening to these things, but I'll pass over to Nathan maybe to do kind of a quick intro here.
Cool. Well, thanks, guys. I'm looking forward to this conversation. I'm Nathan Lebanz. I'm the founder, and I was the CEO at my company called Weymark for a number of years. And now I am the AI product R&D lead there. So that kind of remains, the first thing that I lead with in the bio. We have a real easy to use generative AI powered video creation product for mostly small businesses, although we do partner with a lot of big businesses that also serve the small businesses. So think like cable companies, ad platforms, broadcast TV networks, that kind of stuff. So that's a ton of fun. I, as you mentioned, am also advising at Adathena, a very different context. At Weymark, we're building an application. At Adathena, we're doing education, we're doing task automation, but we're not building like a single technology product. So kind of two sides of AI development and implementation today. And then, as you mentioned also, I'm the host of the Cognitive Revolution podcast, which we started earlier this year, but I'm going really hard on because I just have so many people that I want to talk to. And, I keep going back and forth where I'm like, man, I'm spending a lot of time on this, but then I'm also like, but there's so many more people I want to talk to. So I kind of just keep scheduling, more and more interviews, and have learned a lot from that process as well.
Amazing.
Let's do it. Let's do a quick. That's a good jumping off point for a quick check-in, because you're going on all these podcasts. How's everyone doing? Are we thriving? Are we surviving? What's our fear level of AI at the moment? You go first, Suman.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Okay, yeah, Nathan, you go first. No, Nathan, you're the guest. You go first.
One of my big mantras is it's kind of always both, and I also say everything everywhere all at once is kind of the right thing to expect for the next couple of years. So I think we are thriving. All the AI companies that I know are doing pretty well, if not extremely well. The market is just growing, inbound interest is up. The product is working, for whatever the product is. Certainly true at Weymark. It's just way cooler than it used to be. I have these mantras that's like AI beats UI, and done for you by AI beats do it yourself. And, crossing that threshold has been just a huge difference maker for the quality of the experience that we're able to deliver. And, literally just like word of mouth traffic now comes in because it is genuinely really cool in a way that it wasn't always. So I do think there's, tons of great stuff. At the same time, I'm very ambivalent in the sense that I love the technology, I love working with it, but I do have, what in my mind is a healthy fear of it as well. And I'd put myself kind of in the this is like a shocking mainstream, but I do think that the mainstream of both people in AI and the general public now pretty clearly takes seriously the possibility that there could be a genuine AI disaster. I don't get too bogged down, or try not to get too bogged down in like what exactly are the chances of that. But when you see results that are like, well, half of the AI researchers we polled said it was a 10% or greater chance of existential catastrophe, then I don't really care if it's 10 or 50 or 90. Like that all sounds quite high and scary. And who
Yeah,
really
1% sounds high and scary.
Yeah, totally. I kind of originally got into, and there's a long backstory, but I originally got into AI on essentially that argument, reading, Eliezer's content back in 2006, 7, 8 timeframe. And even then, he was kind of sounding the alarm that like, this is the path we're on and it's going to be really dangerous. And I wasn't, fully sold that like he was right about everything, but I was convinced that, I can't really dismiss this, certainly beyond like a 1% type scenario. And so it felt like, well, geez, nobody's really paying attention to this, even if it is, just 1% or even a tenth of a percent. We don't want to go the way of the dinosaurs because we ignored, I mean, now people allude to don't look up all the time. I used to say that, we have people that kind of scan the skies for asteroids. Why wouldn't we put at least some resources into thinking about this AI thing? But man, back then it felt so speculative. It was like maybe one day and we'll want to be prepared. And, obviously it's gotten a lot more real in the intervening years.
So Will, your question, thriving or surviving?
I threw us way down a path there. My bad. Let's get
no,
back to
it's
it.
good
You
though.
got
I'm
it,
gonna
Suman.
answer quickly. You're gonna go, and then we'll tee up the rest of the convo. So,
Sounds good.
I would say both. So I'm at this retreat, and I just did this like breath work session, and it was really interesting. Actually, just like not to get philosophical. I mean, I will get philosophical in that I was thinking about. I mean, we're in this farm, and it's in the middle of nowhere, and it's very kind of calm and peaceful and intentional. All those words, right? And we were just thinking about breath, and I was like, well, I was thinking about the question like, what separates humans from kind of AI or machines or technology? And it was this very human moment around kind of just like breathing, right, and focusing on that. And so I was just thinking about the fact that like what humanizes us is actually our bodies, right? And like I was just having this whole existential conversation in my head about like, hey, even if AI will make like is more productive, there are elements of humanity that it doesn't have, which I think gave me some positivity. I'll just pause with that one and I'll give it to Will.
I love that. And I'll go, and then I actually have a question for Nathan based off of that. But I'm thriving today. Last night, my thing with generative AI is while I'm scared of it, in the short term, it's making me way more productive and happier. So last night I was able to fix a bug and push some code because I couldn't figure it out, and Stack Overflow couldn't give me the answer. Put it in the chat GPT. It identified something I couldn't find online, fixed a bug for me, got me unblocked, went to bed, woke up, went to Barry's this morning, got my coffee. I'm like hyped up on energy. Like it's a great day. A lot of energy in New York today. I love your breath comment, Suman, because I have often wondered like when will I know that we've built AGI and a conscious system? And the only thing I can think of to really tell is if a computer enjoys listening to a story, because that feels uniquely human as well. There's something different about creating a story and telling a story, which ChatGPT can already do, or these language models. But could it listen to a story and be on the edge of its seat and want to hear what happens next the way us humans do? I don't know how we measure that, but that would be the mark of AGI for me. Nathan, I wonder, what do you think? When do you see something and think that's AGI?
Well, there's a lot of different definitions of that, certainly. And I think it is a point of major confusion right now. People kind of often talking past each other because they're kind of, thinking of that, conceiving of it quite differently in many cases. I do think it's really interesting that, for the longest time, this is not an original observation by me, but for the longest time, at least in like the Western tradition, the idea was kind of we're special and different from the animals because we have this intellectual ability that they don't have, and that's why we get to rule the world and they don't, and we get to do whatever we want with them. Has kind of been, obviously that's been challenged, but it's was kind of the default for a long time. And now with these AI systems arising, it's kind of flipped, and it's like, well, what separates us from the AIs? Well, it's all this animal stuff that we have. We breathe like the animals and we feel. So
exactly.
We're kind of at the overlap of this Venn diagram where there's like cognitively advanced systems that we're building out, increasingly like potential peers or even rivals to us. And then we've got all these
Yeah.
kind of, biological, biologically similar, shared ancestor type other creatures. I really don't know, in terms of like, if you think of AGI as a consciousness, in a conscious, sort of, if that's the litmus test for you, I'm not saying that that's what you're saying, but, somebody might say, well, it's not AGI until it's conscious. I think it's tough. I'm not sure that it's necessary or sufficient, honestly. I can definitely imagine, or, it seems coherent to me to believe that there could be an AGI system as OpenAI kind of defines it, which is like something that can outperform humans at economically valuable work across, almost all, if not all, economic niches. I don't think that sort of thing has to be conscious. It doesn't necessarily have to feel like anything to be that thing. And my best guess, we're starting to see like GPT-4 already can outperform the average person at most tasks. It still falls short of an expert on most tasks, but it is like well above average, right? It's getting 90th, top 10% in the bar exam. So it can clearly outperform the average person on most tasks. My guess is it's not conscious and it doesn't feel like anything to be GPT-4. But I also am a little bit unclear why people are so confident in that in general. I don't know why it feels like anything to be me. I don't know, like, as a kid, I was told that animals don't feel anything, and I took that at face value. And that now seems kind of crazy to me. Even like, I remember a friend of the family who owned a dog and said, they're not conscious. They just, it's all instinct. And it's like, that seems very wrong in retrospect. How far down that,
right.
Yeah, it seems crazy, right? How far down that animal scale, though, would you go before maybe you're like, well, at the level of like, some nematode, or whatever, like certainly you get to like a bacteria. Not too many people seem to think a bacteria, individual bacteria would be conscious. But that line, it's probably some sort of continuum that we don't really understand. And could GPT-4 exist on some place on that spectrum? Like, I have no basis to be extremely, just like I'm like, I can't be that confident that it's not going to take over the world and kill us all. I'm also not that confident that it's not conscious. Like, I'd bet against it, but given that we can't even possibly resolve the bet, how confident can I really be?
Right.
Yes. The humanity question is interesting. So Nathan, I want to tackle a few quite like sections of stuff with you. For the first, we've actually covered a bit, which is like your time at Weymark. But I would love to hear specifically. I would say you're like down the rabbit hole. Not to use kind of a Web3 or wherever that came from, down the rabbit hole with regards to AI, and you went from leaving as the CEO and founder of Weymark to not being that intentionally, and then spending your time in different ways, and now becoming what you call an AI scout. Like, why? What? First of all, what does all that stuff mean, and then why philosophically have you made those decisions?
Yeah, probably a couple different key moments in time. When we got, or at least when I got, real conviction around AI in a Waymark context was summer and really Labor Day of 2021, which is
there's a specific date. You're like,
yeah,
that was the day.
I took the day off, kind of a little bit of a retreat day, type of thing for myself. A little, just meditation, quiet time, getting some sun, and I came up with the mantra AI or die for Waymark, and I was just like, this stuff is. It wasn't working for us yet, to be clear. GPT-3 was out, but we had not successfully applied it, and we'd tried a bunch of prompt engineering stuff, and we couldn't quite get it to work for us yet at that time. But it just became clear that, like, the combination of, the sort of blank slate problem that we talked about earlier, where customers are just kind of like, I don't know, you've got all these tools, but I don't really have anything to say. That was, like, staring us in the face pretty hard. There's a lot of, as you can easily imagine, right? There's a lot of competition in the space for content creation software. And I was just kind of like, there's no way for us to be successful without mastering this new, technology wave. Like, we have to catch it as early as possible. And we were already working on it. So shortly thereafter, probably 2 weeks later, was when we got our first OpenAI powered, fine-tuned GPT-3 to work. on the most basic level, we stubbed our toe on everything you can imagine along the way. By the way, it was a lot harder then than it is now. So like a lot of the elbow grease and, just grinding through kind of, data cleaning type work is much, much easier now than it was then. But on, I think, like roughly September 15th of 2021, we got our first fine-tuned model to at least perform the task structurally consistently, meaning like we could give it a script format and it could return the proper format. And we'd look at that copy and be like, man, that's still kind of shit copy. But at least, it'll work within our system now. And from there, I was kind of like, all right, I'm going all in on this. So I essentially, was still nominally CEO, but I kind of said, guys, we're not doing anything else until we figure this out. Even to our board, I was like, I'm not having board meetings right now. We're all in on this. We're going to come back up.
He's like, guys, have you heard about AI? No board meetings.
Yeah. So I created an AI 101 for Weymark, and I invited the board members to that. And I was like, you want to come, this is what we're doing. So if you want to come and do this, we can do it. Otherwise, nothing really matters. It's AI or die. We're going to die if we don't, because other people are going to do it, right? So we either have to be on it and ahead of it, or, somebody else is going to eat our lunch. And I basically did that for 6 months, and 6 months turns out to be about as long as you can kind of neglect everything else in the role of a startup CEO before people are like, yeah, I know you're really into this AI thing, but like we do have to do the comp review or like it's just not going to work. So at that point, I was kind of like very fortunate, honestly. I have a longtime friend and teammate, Alex Persky Stern is his name. He's now the CEO. He has been with the company a long time. He had been the COO. He had been our product lead. So, and he's in many ways better at the job than I am anyway. So it was greatly eased by the fact that I didn't have to look too far for, who I would want to take over. And I didn't feel like I was, abandoning the effort or the team because I knew that he would be successful in the role. So that was a huge, advantage that made it more possible. But yeah, I basically just decided like I didn't really want to go back. The technology is so compelling, and I feel like I had a knack for it. We were making good progress, and I was kind of like, I'd rather do that. I'd rather build the thing than try to go sell the thing right now. So if I can make that role change, let's do it. I did that, and then probably the next big moment was GPT-4. For all of 2022 up through like the first 3 quarters of 2022, I was just no meetings, deep work every day, curiosity led. How am I going to find the right models and put them together and make this thing awesome? And that's really all I did. But along the way, I had kind of, we were an early OpenAI customer, right? You go back to 2021, they didn't have that many customers. Certainly the world now is beating a path to their door, and like they've got way bigger, accounts than us. But at the time, they didn't have that many, and we kind of established ourselves as a good source of feedback for them. We bought into a little consulting program that they had that they no longer even offer. Now it's like you want to buy like dedicated capacity at scale and like an enterprise account, then we'll like give you an account manager. Then we weren't even spending much, but for a couple $1,000 a month, they gave us an account manager, some advising along the way. We established ourselves as a good source of just product feedback. And that then got us on a list for customer preview access to what we now know is GPT-4. And that was another kind of clear moment for me where I was like, I knew this stuff was getting better. I already thought it was going to be transformative. I'd been doing more and more task automation with it. Even in our R&D stack at Weymark, it had already gotten to the point where I was preferring to use AI for various tasks rather than doing it, kind of the traditional way. Things like video annotation, for example, where we need to create some data set to do a fine-tuned model for whatever. You could go hire somebody on Upwork to do that, or you could grind it out yourself. By the summer of 2022, we were already in a place where it was like, it's better to use an AI system to do this because, it does take some setup and legwork, but once you have it, then you can go back to it any time. Your Upwork contractor is not necessarily going to be there next time. The reliability can be inconsistent. With our fine-tuned models, the reliability wasn't perfect, but it was at least consistent. And we got ourselves into a pretty good like bootstrapping thing where we do 20 examples manually for whatever task, fine tune a model. That would usually get us like 80% of the way there. Then we'd like find the failure cases, fix those, build a bigger data set, fine tune again, do that like 2 or 3 iterations. We could usually get ourselves to where we could automate whatever task reasonably well. So I was already like, and this is all pre GPT-4, right? This is like Text DaVinci 002, if the model names, like that was the state of the art at the time. And I was like, it's definitely like a transformative technology. But then when GPT-4 preview access came, that was like a, I'll never forget where I was kind of moment, because it was just so qualitatively different, right? And the bottom 10%, bar exam to top 10%, that was immediately obvious, just the depth of conversation that you could have with this thing, the types of questions that it could answer. And at that point, I was kind of like, wow, this is not just transformative, but it's going to be like very transformative very quickly. And, this privileged access that I have, like I could sort of, use it some and keep doing the Weymark stuff. But what I decided to do, and fortunately I had also built up a little bit of R&D inventory, so I could kind of say, I can take a little time away from this, and there's still enough projects for, the engineering team to implement for a while at least. I'm just going to go all in on using this window to try to understand this thing as well as possible. I basically just made it my business to be like, at least outside of OpenAI, I tried to be kind of the most knowledgeable person about every aspect of what the system could do. And boy, that was a fascinating time. And a little unnerving, honestly.
I think
it was because we were just in kind of an isolated, little testing pocket of the world. Not really able to talk to people about it as as you'd expect. They had rules around that sort of thing. So yeah, it was a transformative moment. And from there, I was just kind of like, all right, I think the most valuable thing I can do is just try to help others understand what is happening. And I've kind of gradually, framed that up into the AI Scout, label that I use these days. But certainly that was a breaking point. Just stayed up all night, like just running all these. Yeah. It wasn't even it's like you got beyond. It was beyond prompting. It's like now I'm just having conversations, and they're really pretty compelling. So yeah, I mean, it was clear to me immediately that it was going to be a big deal.
You were, just being so dialed on OpenAI early and playing with, watching it evolve. I'm curious if you had to guess, like as revenue usually follows a power law, right? And like your biggest customer is an outsized share of revenue and on down. If you were at OpenAI looking at the revenue stack, what use case do you think is that Pareto principle, like lion's share of the revenue use case that they see today?
I think it's changing very quickly. They've said that, essentially the Weymark style use case of like marketing copy was a large share of their revenue for a good chunk of time anyway. And, the good reason for that being like, there's a ton of that on the internet. It was relatively easy to prompt into, relatively low stakes, easy to just kind of rifle through stuff. So I think that has been the majority of revenue for most of their revenue generating history. I don't really know right now exactly how that has changed, but I do think it is changing pretty dramatically, both because
like marketing copy and stuff like that, like generate blog posts and like Jasper.
Yes, Jasper is what has been a huge customer. I think it's changing on both sides though, because Jasper is in a competitive market, obviously, and has spent a lot with OpenAI over time. And they are now fine-tuning their own models. And so they're beginning to take some of their OpenAI cost out. And Weymark isn't that big. So, we don't have... And we also have a very... When you really get into these things, one interesting question is like, how many of your generations are actually useful for people? The lower the rate of success, the more kind of overhead in terms of the generation or inference or OpenAI bill that you have. We actually have a very high success rate. So something like 1 in 3 maybe of the videos that people generate they ultimately like enough to edit and download. And so we're not seeing like insane, iteration or insane like generation volume per like monetizable output, within our product. Different writing products could be very different there. I don't know anything about Jasper's metrics, but you can imagine like going to some of these open-ended writing tools and being like, it might be 1 in 50, as opposed to the Weymark 1 in 3 that's actually useful. And so they may have a lot more kind of incentive to try to take OpenAI cost out. They now can do that with these open source alternatives if they want to. Jasper is on the Mosaic ML homepage as a featured customer. I'm sure they continue to use OpenAI as well. But, for many things, we are now at the point, for like marketing copy type use cases, we are at the point where open source models, fine-tuned, can get you there. And then the next generation of revenue for OpenAI, I think, is going to be around the leading edge capability. I mean, they have the ChatGPT API, but at $2 per million tokens, that's priced competitively. Whereas GPT-4, is like 20 times more expensive at the retail level. But then they're also starting to sell this like dedicated capacity and, robust fine tuning. And for that kind of stuff, they're approaching enterprises and saying, don't even think about this in terms of tokens. Think about it in terms of capability that you don't have that you could have, right? And if you buy into this, and I don't know their pricing, there has been a leak about it, and I've kind of analyzed that, but I don't know if it's, I'm sure it's continuing to evolve. But it's like a pretty obvious sale, I think, to many large enterprises at this point to be like, if you buy in at $1 million, you're going to have this ability to fine tune GPT-4. You can't get it anywhere else. So do you want to have that or not have it? It starts at $1 million. And I think, for many, CEOs or CTOs or CIOs or whatever today, it's kind of like, can I really afford not to buy that?
Yeah. And then when it becomes a competitive and you're like, oh, someone else in your field is doing that, then you're like, well, shit.
You can't be left behind.
It's going to be really interesting from a B2B enterprise side of things. So, yeah. Those internal conversations must be fascinating on all ends, the technology and the business side of it, to be honest. On the business side, kind of task automation, I think so. You're working with Athena. I'd be curious to hear a little bit about kind of what you're doing with them, because we use Athena, folks. We love Athena. Shameless plug, and Will does as well. And if you could just describe kind of what Athena does a bit, and then also the virtual EAs, and then how are you helping them like use AI to become more productive, and why?
Yeah, there's a lot of threads to pull there. So Athena, as you mentioned, is an executive assistant company. They recruit in the Philippines and then match one-to-one executive assistants with clients, mostly in the United States, but could be anywhere in the world. They do take a distinctive approach. They actually call the EAs XPs, which stands for Executive Partner. And one of the core values of the company is always think long term. So they really try to set up these kind of long term, one-to-one, like, executive and XP partnerships that will hopefully, they aim for like 10-year partnerships. So that is important for multiple reasons. It's a lot of what drives the company, but it's also kind of cashes out to, there's not really a standard client. There's not really a standard relationship. The needs are all very idiosyncratic. The tools that people use, even for things like communication, vary widely. And it's all about like training the XPs and then helping them kind of support the client in whatever way. And, no way is too idiosyncratic. If you're going to be doing this for 10 years, you're going to kind of tailor your approach to that client. So that's all context. I mean, AI, obviously, as you could imagine, a lot of use cases there. At a general kind of high level, the CEO is like, we're not an AI company, but we want to be the best at using AI. And so my, role as advisor is to try to help facilitate that, starting really just with education. And, so again, just like I did the Weymark AI 101, we're now doing Athena AI 101. It's of course different because the tools have changed, right? They're much more advanced. It's in many ways like a lot easier to introduce AI to people now because it often just works out of the box, in a way that even a few months ago it really didn't. So we're putting together these kind of, courses, core techniques, like what is this stuff? How do you access it? What is prompt engineering? Like, what are the things about that you actually need to know? Breaking that down into just kind of bite-sized, hopefully consumable, easy to understand lessons. I'm doing live AI office hours twice a week right now, where people just, come in on a Zoom.
Wow.
And it's like 200 plus EAs that are just, trying to upskill on AI, and that we bring some packaged kind of content.
And they're joining,
for them,
people join these office hours. It's like being well received.
Yeah, I think people know that it's gonna be a big part of how they work. I'm not, I don't think I would be the one that people would send their pushback to necessarily, but I don't think there's much of that. I think it's really there's probably a little bit of intimidation factor that we have to get over. But, and maybe, maybe some fear. I mean, I certainly have my, streak of fear with AI, so I'm sure that exists as well. But in practice, most of the time, I kind of get the like mind blown emoji reaction. That's like the most, if you put it in emoji form, it would be the mind blown emoji. It would be the biggest,
What's one of the biggest mind blow emoji if you put out an example or show in an office hour? What's gotten the biggest? What literal example have you shown that's gotten the biggest reaction?
We start with pretty basic techniques, and even those, will blow people's minds pretty regularly. So, we just start off, and our general strategy is we're going to start with GPT-4 because it's the easiest to get to work. So, we want to take the easy path to maximum quality and value. And then if, and I was going to give this caveat, if, we're running up our bill, first of all, we'll be saving a lot compared to what we would have been spending, to power those tasks by a human. So let's keep that in mind. Mm-hmm. But if we are seeing like a bill, that's getting uncomfortable, then we can revisit and maybe look at a cheaper model, or, there's a lot of things we could try to do. But let's first drive toward value. So we always start with GPT-4. We really just start with basic instructions. Like, did you even know that you can just tell an AI what to do? And, for the vast majority of things you might ask it to do, it will understand you, and it will do it. And you'll feel like it actually got what you were trying to get at and like addressed your need in a reasonable way. That's a mind blown, for a lot of people right off the bat, right? And many people I think have at least used ChatGPT, so they have some knowledge of that, but let's not lose sight of the fact that like that is incredible and didn't, up until recently didn't really exist.
There's so many possibilities. When I always forget, like we had a call with Suman's team, and one of his Athena EAs actually brought up that she's using it for her grocery list, which I thought was such a cool use case of I'm going to throw everything in a list and you're going to organize it by section for me.
Oh,
and
that was
such a little, so useful. I would have never thought to do that, but of course, GPT could crush that use case of, we're going to sort the fruit together and the meat together and everything. Just basic formatting is so helpful.
Yeah, it's incredible.
It makes the shopping experience way shorter. You just go to the, as opposed to going.
Going from unstructured to structured data is a huge use case. It's like easy to forget that this didn't exist up until quite recently, but you can now take in arbitrary stuff and like, summarize it down to 10 key points, or even get more, explicit than that. I need key facts, even put them into a JSON data format, so that I can pipe it into whatever other system. You combine these few kind of core tasks and you can do a lot of stuff.
Yeah, it is so cool. Do you see, as you're teaching people about how to use these, do you find that the adoption curve is faster because it's easier to ask questions and learn? Like, how has it changed the learning process in this case of teaching people about it versus if you were trying to train them on machine learning 5 years ago?
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly dramatically easier to, get comfortable asking ChatGPT some questions than it is to, understand kind of fundamentals of machine learning. So we're not really teaching fundamentals. I try to cover basic things that at least like help you interpret what you're seeing. So we do get into the level of like, okay, a language model, it predicts one token at a time. That's why you're seeing like the text kind of stream onto the page, because what it's doing is it is predicting just the next token, and break down what is a token. It's basically a word, whatever. And then it's doing that iteratively so that it's using what it predicted the first time to inform what it's going to predict the second time. And that's, a big part of how it can be coherent as it's making these one by one predictions. So I get into kind of that level of like mechanically, how does it work? We do not get into like transformer architecture, because, that's not super practical, and, we're really trying to help people, be more efficient and not send them, on a wild goose chase. They don't have to come down the rabbit hole with me necessarily. They just need to learn some core skills.
Some of them come back and say, "Hey, we're following Nathan's path. We're all AI scouts now. We're no longer."
There are a few that are true all stars, and it's inspiring. And I honestly welcome that and kind of need it. I always try to tell people like, one of my goals, which I'm constantly failing to meet, is to have no major blind spots in the AI space. And but it's just not really feasible anymore or realistic to expect, that anybody could have no major blind spots. So I, by all means, try to encourage those that are like the most enthusiastic to kind of, scout alongside me.
As you should. It's a great thing, globalization and democratizing access to knowledge and tools. I know we're coming up on time here, so I got one last question. If you got time to
yeah,
answer.
I'm flexible. So if you guys want to run a little long, it's cool with me as well.
Cool. So we were talking about, are you surviving or thriving? And I was actually having this conversation earlier today with someone, which are basically, I'm like, well, what are humanity's like biggest problems, and how might AI actually help them? Some of the problems I was thinking of were climate change and environmental destruction, things around like access to healthcare, right, and people not having access to appropriate healthcare, diseases. So then maybe like with those problems, maybe frame like, okay, I just talked about climate and energy, essentially like medicine and biotech, big problems, right? How would AI help those other than just like marketing copy?
Yeah, that's really the big headline, I think, of the last few months with the release of GPT-4, and Google now with Palm 2 is kind of not quite as polished, but at a similar level of raw capability, I think. So take medicine first, right? I mean, just a couple of recent episodes of my podcast, I interviewed the author of The AI Revolution in Medicine, a guy named Professor Zach Kahani, and I use that professor because I think it's important to note that like, this dude is as credentialed as they come. He's the chair of the department at Harvard, and he got early access to GPT-4 around the same time frame that I did. He started taking it on, I don't know, to say he took it on rounds is maybe a little bit of, dramatization, but he basically did a similar thing to me, like just went hard. Oh my God, this technology seems like it could be transformative. Let me try to explore it as much as I possibly can. Now he's got this book out. But some of his kind of bottom line things are GPT-4 is clinically superhuman. He uses that's a direct quote, clinically superhuman. He also says it will soon be considered substandard to receive medical advice that is not backed, or where the human doctor is not complemented by a GPT-4 like system. Clinical trials, back office, like insurance type stuff. Clinical trials is a great one because it's a mess today, right? You have like all these clinical trials going on. They have all these kind of, ideal patient profiles that they define. And then, there's kind of this information gets kind of shared. Somehow it's, structured, I'm sure on some level, but like from the perspective of an individual practitioner, there's no way to like keep track of all that. So you've got this very sort of haphazard matching that goes on between, patients who really need, something. They're, typically if you're looking for a clinical trial spot, you have a big problem that is not addressed. And then the trials themselves, and, that is just extremely inefficient. So they're now getting, GPT-4 is now getting to the point where it can do that work. It can just grind. Here's a patient profile. Here's a clinical trial profile. Does this seem like a likely match? And we're doing task automation like that at Athena too. Very similar structure. Here, that one of the biggest value drivers that we think we can like level up pretty quickly is the quality of the client and the assistant match. The the pool is pretty big, right? It's a scaling company, so you may have in any given month, whatever, 100 clients that are coming on, and there's maybe 200 assistants in the kind of available matching pool. These are folks that have been screened, and they screen aggressively, and then hire, and then some basic training, and then it's like, okay, now we need to match you with a client. Well, if you've got 100 clients and you got 200 XPs, you've got, a little quick math would say you've got 20,000 bits of comparative analysis that you could perform, but the team just can't do that, right? So in practice, historically, it has not been the case that every client and every possible XP have been assessed for a possible match. Just like it's not been the case that every patient in need of, a lifeline and every clinical trial have been assessed for a match. But, GPT-4 doesn't sleep, and it's, can be parallelized. So now we can do that at Athena, where we can literally just execute every single one of those. And then, at the end of the process, there's kind of, more core techniques that we teach, of course, chain of thought, like, think step by step, explain your reasoning in detail before giving a final answer. And we just banned, as of now, these possible matches according to a rubric that we've defined, which is 1,000 words in and of itself. But basically say you're going to give this a 1 to 5 score, which I actually shouldn't even say that. What we actually do is like poor, below average, average, good, excellent, or whatever. Because the more semantic you can make your labels, the better relative to like 1 to 5 in general. Anyway, that's details. But then, at the end of the process, you've got, all right, who's excellent for this client? Let's take a look at that. We've now immediately narrowed the pool. We can look at those, and we can send off a few excellent matches, and we can be confident. We can also do things that like, it's just explaining why the match, in the process as it has existed. There's times of the essence, whatever. People don't have time to write for every single match why we thought this was a good match. But GPT-4 will happily, bang that out, and it's usually pretty good. So clinical trial, is a very analogous problem structurally. You have to have a pretty damn smart AI to be able to do that, and we only recently have them. But even just the efficiency of those clinical trial matches is going to be transformative. And then think about all the bullshit that happens with billing and insurance, and today we have doctors' offices or practice groups or hospitals or whatever employ people or whole teams to interface with the insurance company. The insurance company has whole teams, back to interface with them. I think those are going to be like bot to bot interactions before we know it. And, exactly how that dynamic plays out, I think is hard to guess. But certainly the cost is going to drop a lot.
Surplus. Yeah, that's what I was going to say. It's like everyone always shows a chart of around like medical. Everything is declining with regards to costs. Like a TV costs like whatever 1/10 it used to cost, and healthcare costs more. And you're like, what the heck? Doesn't make any sense. And so, yeah, I think the downside perhaps is where do all those jobs go if they are replaced by bots? The upside is it's super expensive for people to get affordable healthcare. Not only in the United States, they might not be able to get the healthcare in other countries, in third world countries or wherever. So there's some definitely positive humanities. What about climate change, though? That to me is like one thing I'm super passionate about.
Yeah, I think a little bit harder in that at the current moment, and this is something I was pretty obsessed with in my GPT-4 red teaming, it kind of became the key question for me was, does this thing show brilliance beyond, let's say at or even above the level of human expert? And, there's obviously a lot of different domains you could try to assess that in. My general finding across the board was it at best seems to kind of touch human expert level, but it never really seems to exceed it. And one of the things that it doesn't seem to do yet is generate high quality novel hypotheses for, future, for downstream scientific inquiry. It can, so I would divide things into like things where there is a standard. In medicine there is a standard of care. In the law there is a standard of professional responsibility, and what those are is pretty well established, and like what the resources are, how you sort of consult, the existing information and make decisions is, if not always put into practice as it's written on paper, it is at least written on paper. And that allows the AI to like learn that, dig into that. There's a lot of data there. So I think you can expect, already and certainly in the near term, like pretty high fidelity standard of care type interactions with an AI doctor. But on the hypothesis generation side, that's not really written down, right? We don't have a way to codify this is how you generate an insightful, unobvious hypothesis that actually has some sort of elevated chance of being validated by experiment. That's kind of the genius moment, that like the human scientists can do. And AI
that's the
can't
difference,
do that
it feels
yet.
like, of operating within a system of rules versus being creative, right? Like generating new ideas, which we haven't seen yet.
Yeah. So I've pushed on
Really.
that pretty
Maybe me.
hard, and I have not been able to demonstrate. And as far as I can tell, from reading other people's attempts and whatnot, you see the kind of like sparks of AGI, but I would say it is still sparks, and you're not really seeing the sort that kind of core thing of like good hypothesis generation. I don't see that happening. So on the climate change question, what you'd really want from a dream AGI would be like a great solution. Yeah, like here's a technology solution, boom. But we're not seeing AI invent new stuff like that yet. What I would say though, still, even if there's no further breakthroughs, I think one of the worst takes on AI right now is that the energy costs are super high, or it's going to, create tons of carbon or whatever. I've done some analysis on this as well, and it's like, if you can save one cross-town trip, you can use all the AI you want, in like a given period of time, because it costs a lot
I like
more
that
to
framing.
drive
That's
your
cool.
Tesla to the doctor's office, by orders of magnitude, than it does to consult the AI. Like the inference is cheap. And it does. It uses energy. So we're gonna have data centers. We're gonna have to charge our phones, like for sure. But the amount of energy that your phone uses is not that much. Like this is something that GPT-4 told me back in the red teaming, because I was getting interested in this, and so I asked it like, how much energy does. Well, I was actually trying to buy a solar panel because I wanted to have some little backup in case my power. We had a power outage, and I was like, I don't necessarily want like a huge generator, but I at least want to be able to charge my phone. So what kind of retail solar panel should I get so that I can at least charge my phone if we have like a couple day, power outage? So I had this conversation with GPT-4 and asked it like, well, how much power does my phone actually have? What does it store? And it does not store much. Like a typical phone battery, this is all per GPT-4, but I've verified it. Now you're getting up to like 15, 20, 25 watt hours of energy. And like a typical phone charger used to be a 5-watt phone charger. Now they've upped those a little bit, as the batteries have gotten a little bit bigger. So you maybe now have 10, 15, watt chargers. But that compares to like a traditional light bulb, 40, 60 watts. Even an efficient light bulb is like, 5, 10 watts. So your whole day's worth of phone energy is, and that includes, making the screen light up, is basically 1 hour, maybe a couple hours of like a modern efficient light bulb. And so now we're seeing also the development where kind of not the biggest and best models, but like your sort of llama tier, pretty good, although, a step below like the very best models for sure. But nevertheless, like incredibly powerful stuff that would have been state of the art, not that long ago, and would have been totally mind blowing, not that long ago, can now run on an edge device. So I've been really trying to figure out in a data center how much electricity
Very
exactly is used, and I can't quite pin that down yet. But what is clear is like if you can run a pretty damn good model on your phone in roughly real time, then you've put a pretty low upper bound on how much electricity it takes to do that. And so, again, you can just basically use all you want. And if you save like any trip, you're coming out ahead on emissions. So I think that will be a driver in the short term.
On that note, I know we kept you for longer than intended, Nathan.
Yeah, all good.
Looking forward to perhaps having some more. Enjoy the long weekend here. No,
Thank you very
not
much,
with
guys.
your AI homies. Don't even.
Yeah,
No AI
we'll
homies.
mostly be hanging
Yeah.
out with other humans. Maybe we'll consult a little bit as needed. But yeah, thank you. It's been a lot of fun.
Cheers.
Yeah.
Have a good one.
See ya.